Hello, I'm ED-SKaR, and rather than painting this week, I accidentally a new model, as sometimes we tend to do, and I need to put it together at some point, so I thought may as well put it together on livestream. This is, as you can tell from the box, a Soviet T34 ZP, which is a kind of sci-fi version of the T34. If you see the picture, the hull is a kind of standard late World War II T34 as existed in history. The turret, however, is the ZP part of things and is a science fiction energy weapon sort of thing. And of course, this is because it is for Conflict 47, a kind of alternate history, game, which takes place in, as you might expect, 1947. In the real world, after World War II would have ended, but in the fiction of the game, it continues. Kind of in a similar way to how the tank works in the fiction, being that it's a T-34 with a science fiction turret on. We actually have mixed media model kit. So we have a plastic T-34, and this is, I think the turret here is for the T-34-85? Does it say? T-34-85, yes. That's a kind of late war Soviet tank from World War II, historical version. But then in here we have, in resin, oddly enough, our turret with the energy cannon. And that goes on to the turret like that. Once it's painted, it does mention in the notes that, yeah, resin cast parts, you have to wash them. Well, you don't have to wash them, but it's best if you wash them. No sound. No sound at all? Okay, my researcher for the Order Redactus is telling me that my sound is not coming through. So I'm going to quickly check on that. If you'll just give me a second to run through my audio. Yep, it's all active and running. It should be. Yep. If anyone else is in chat, can you say if you can hear me or not? I'm just checking my... So that's my microphone. My microphone's kicking out sound. I can see the bars for the music. Interesting. Let me cipher those. It was going to your headphones even though they were turned off. Okay. Well, thankfully we got that sorted out. You can check the audio levels now that you've got sound, I hope. Yes, so plastic model kit of a historical tank with a resin cast turret, which is an alternate version for the science fiction game. Strangely, not only is there the plastic main kit with the resin cast extra bit, which sort of makes sense, but it actually has a metal turret hatch, which is something that doesn't necessarily make quite as much sense, because that will go on there. Delay is nearly a minute and a half. Oh dear. Well, Unfortunately, there's not much I can do about the delay. That's just something that YouTube decides I'm not popular enough to get the cool stuff and the fast speeds. Which way does this turret go up? Let's have a close focus for a bit. So we've got what might be a hinge. I'm not actually convinced that that's a hinge or not. But then on the other side, what looks like a handle. And then if I flip it the other way up, we have also what looks like a handle. But it would be difficult to position that in a way that makes it look like it's open. Like gluing it down as if it's closed, that's fine. But I kind of want to have it glued open so that I can have a crew member sticking their head out. There is one last part of the kit, which is the transfer sheets, and this is the T34-85 transfer sheet. So we've got some numbers, some red stars, and some various writing in Cyrillic. Can't really see the white on that blue, but it's there. I almost certainly will not be using any of the decals just because I'd rather practice my my freehand. That would be a cool excuse to paint some small things, but certainly a useful thing for putting on some accurate decals. I like how well that fits. It fits really nicely. Well, let's have a look at the instructions, which are thin. However, I think they're detailed enough to know what's going on. Every part is mentioned. And it seems to be a relatively easy kit to put together. Now that I've said that, I'm going to have some problems. Let's start with the track sections. So up here we've got just how the track pieces go together. Are there any markings on which one is left and which one is right? There are not. However, they appear to be mirrored. So I suspect that I can just grab any combination of the two different types of track piece and make it work. There's kind of a flatter one, which I assume is the bottom, and a wrinkly one, which is most likely the top, given that the track will rest and sag in between the wheels. Let's also grab a wheel section. Very different from an FX kit or a Revell kit, where they're very finely detailed. With that type of kit, the wheels and each and every part of the suspension would be modelled and separate, which is nice to go through that kind of detail sometime. But it's also nice to have a simpler model kit that still looks good, particularly as this is a wargaming model, not a display model. It makes sense. It's not to say that you can't play Bolt Action or Conflict 47 in 1:72 scale with really nice Airfix kits, because I know some people who do exactly that. I hate painting them because they're awful, but I have some, I think they're British Commandos in 1:72 scale that came with an Airfix kit a while back. And I've got a couple of 1 to 72nd tanks, I think. I've moved it downstairs because I'm doing some filming with it. But I have some, like one of the commemorative sets from Airfix. So it makes sense to me that these slots on the tracks and the slots on the kind of wheel piece, they kind of line up. I wonder if they line up with anything like, say, these bars on the lower hull. Yep, I'm going to go with that's exactly what they're for. Now, seeing as I want to paint this in sub-assemblies, I definitely want to keep the tracks separate. Do I want to keep the tracks separate, or do I want to glue them to the lower? I'll decide that in a minute. Does it matter which way around this goes? I think it does, because that didn't really fit very well. And that does. Let's hold it that way around so you can see it. There we go. That's how one track piece goes together. Let's get the lower hull, which ostensibly is just a box. Ostensibly? That's not the right word. It is, very simply put, a box. I'm also going to want to compare that to the upper hull as well. So if I put this in kind of like, see if I can hold it all in place. Kind of like that. That gives me access to pretty much all of the tracks to paint it still. So it might be worth gluing it together on here like that. But just to make sure, let's test it with the upper hull as well. So how does the upper hull go on? Is it that way around? It is that way around. Yeah, so we've got quite an armoured skirt covering the top of the tracks. So when I put them on here, yeah. As I suspected, a lot of the tracks are now covered, which makes painting in here extremely difficult. Which actually means it's somewhat convenient that we have the separate lower hull. Clean these up now. So the plan so far is to get the track sections glued together to the main hull, to the lower hull, and then everything on the upper hull. And most likely the turret will be a third piece, although there's now 2 turrets. And then I'll paint them in those groups as sub-assemblies. Now I distinctly remember there being an extra piece on the turret. There it is. So there's these kind of axle covers, axle cowling. Looks like it's these. And the instructions says to put those on before the tracks. So we shall see how that works. And they go like this. Which way? According to the instructions, it's like the whole side towards the outside. And that does seem to fit fairly well. How many pieces? Here's the challenge. How many pieces do I cut off the sprue before I actually glue something in place? I think it's about time we glued this piece in place. It seems to go in. It seems to be quite happy there. And that bulge at the back looks like the covering that it should be. Axle covering. So that will squirt poly cement. Kind of just pull it around a bit and then hold it in place. We've got a little bit of leak out, but probably end up looking just like a weld. And while that's at least started, clean up this other piece. That fits nicely on the other side. Actually, which way round? Because I don't know which way around the track pieces go yet. Which way is front? Because I'm pretty sure these cowlings go on the kind of, this is the back of the lower hull that I'm working on at the moment. So is there any clear indication? There's some indication. So it looks like the smallest wheel goes towards the front. So it would be like that. And that fits in nicely. Lines up with the back. Whoop. It does seem to line up nicely with everything. Just dummy check for the box. Right, let's glue the tracks on then. Another bot. Amazing. See if you've got the controls for that Fox emits. You should have, I think it's hide from channel. Excellent, thank you. That seems to line up well. Let's check the bottom piece. Which way around does that go? Yeah, that's the way that fits. So I probably want to get the poly cement on the join, kind of the front and back of the tracks, but also on each of the wheels to hold it in place. So let's have a go at that, see if that makes sense. Yep, that works, that goes together nicely. So now let's just check once again that we're putting this in the right place on the hull. I think that just really neatly glues into place like that. That does make a lot of sense. My polystyrene cement is starting to run out. I have another tube from a different brand, so it shouldn't be a problem. But I like this brand. Hold that nice and tight for a second. Let's see how that sits. Hey, that looks pretty good already. What are we, 20 minutes in? And we have a recognizable piece of a tank. So let's get the other side of the tracks. And complete the mirror. My outro song. Ah, interesting. Just thinking that the injection points on the track sections are slightly in different places, but they're actually, it's just this one where there's the kind of the cutout for the slot. So they've just moved the sprue injection point, the gate, just so it's off of that. Come on, get gear off. There we go. Clean up these pieces then. I do seem to be drifting off of camera as always. Those fairly smooth actually. I don't really need to worry about these too much because they're not going to be visible in the slightest, but just want to make sure they're cut down enough that the pieces go together evenly. That should be enough. So these should go on like that, and everything should line up, which it does seem to do quite nicely. And so let us continue. That's the top piece in place. I'm going to make sure that the slots line up, like so. And then for joining the top and bottom tracks, we need to get the kind of this bit of the front and a little blob on each of the wheels. There we go. Hello, Grandpa Werewolf. How are you doing? Just want to make sure that these bits of tracks line up. Although actually they're probably going to shift as I press them onto the lower hull. So I should probably get that done, because then it will all hold itself in line, hopefully, maybe. Yeah, like I thought. Just from holding it tightly, kind of just flexes a little bit, but I can just minorly adjust where they sit. The top of the tracks have the little cutout for the slots. Kind of, you see those three, 1, 2, 3, those 3 bars. There's slots in the kind of the main wheel section and in the top of the tracks. But the bottom there isn't, so the bottom track does tend to kind of shift around a little. Is it? Are they like tilted inwards slightly? I think they might be. Is it meant to be? None of the camera angles on the box show that. I don't think that's too much of a problem because it's very minor, and it will be seen from like this angle, like looking down on it. Yeah, I think that'll be alright. So that, with the lower hull done, I think that's the lower hull done. We'll check the instructions. I'll build everything onto the upper hull, but keep it separate. And then when I've finished painting it, I'll glue the upper hull down. I think once I assemble it, if I paint it first and then assemble it, I will have to clean up these joins. Are those? I very nearly grabbed a knife and cut those away because those look like sprue injection points. But they're actually squared off. Yeah. There's these tiny little tabs. Grey snowy day where you are. The T34 is bright and shiny by comparison. Well, it's all flat grey for today. Yeah, right there. Tiny little peg. It's probably a tow hook or something. Well, that's all turret stuff and tracks, so we can ignore that. So we've got all of these bits that we can put onto the main hull, which actually seem to just mainly be the fuel barrels. So let's have a look at the... Nope. Well, that looks like a spare section of tracks, which, according to the picture, go on the front of the hull. Which is not in any of the pictures of... I guess that's just a spare bit to add to it. Question mark? Ah! Whereas question mark symbol, there are choices. You can have an optional... So you can pick a different size box for the side. Okay. Okay. Are these the boxes? I think these two here are the boxes. Very thin, long, thin boxes. I wonder what you'd be storing in a... Yeah, it looks like everything else. Yeah, just one's a bit taller than the other. Let's go for the big one because we want more storage space for whatever. I guess it's some kind of equipment that would be that shape. It has a dinky little hinge. Focus. Look, it's got hinges right here, and the sprue is right on this kind of latch mechanism. That's going to be annoying to clean up. Let's see if I can... Yeah. Got it. I'm not sure how the focal range is when I'm this zoomed in. There we go. The ends were easy enough. Let's go back to that focus. That makes more sense. Yeah, that'll do. It's very odd that they put that sprue injection point on top of the... Speaking of sprue injection points, I haven't cleaned up the top of the hull yet. Kind of the detail of that clasp lock for the box. I would not have put the sprue injection point on that piece. Well placed mold line all the way down the edge here. Oh, I think I cut too deep there. Yeah, I can smooth it out a little bit, but it's still a little crater. Whoops. Oh well. So this box goes like that. Well, that's easy enough. Do I have any poly cement left? Is there any in here? There we go. As this tube is running out, it's becoming a little stringy, which is a shame. It has some aggregate in it, which actually technically makes this a glue. because usually poly cements aren't. But just with the little bit of aggregate, it helps to bridge any gaps. But now that it's kind of running out and it's getting dry, the last of that aggregate is becoming just a little bit stringy. So we've got some exhaust pipes, what looks like exhaust pipes. Let's grab those. And they look like they go in to these little slots here. Ooh. Don't drop it, don't lose it. Tiny little pieces. I think these are actually some of the smallest parts of the kit. I'm so used to FX tank kits and FX and Revell, where you have to build every part of the suspension and stuff like that. Whereas these, it's a much simpler, much fewer parts, but also a smaller number of these tiny parts. Now, in the picture here, I've just noticed these exhausts are pointing downwards. I may have to do some research. By looking up a picture of some exhausts, and in fact, yep, on some pictures on Google there, they do appear to be pointing downwards. Okay. So let's put them pointing downwards instead. And they do seem to fit quite nicely, just like that. Yeah. I wonder what the reason for putting the exhausts that way around is. There's a few good reasons that I can think of. Snow being the first obvious one. Snow and rain. Also incendiary weaponry like Molotovs. Because rather than gathering liquids and stuff that falls from above, they flow out. There we go, nice. 2 exhausts. What else do we have? We've got... Is that a light bulb? Do we have a headlight? Let's get a headlight. Looks like we also have 2 options for the machine gun. I wonder which one's which. I wonder if there's any difference. But headlight's important because we have to turn it off in the dark so that no one sees us, and how can you turn it off if you don't have it, right? That's why it's so important to have a headlight. Oh. Let's make sure it points forwards, which it's a little wobbly. But it does fit, it's the right shape. Yep. little headlight. I think it's a headlight. So we also have the hull machine gun, which I'm not sure what the difference is. It looks like one might be have a water jacket, which would make it a 1910 Maxim. But let's go for the unshrouded one, just because it's a little more visually interesting. Put those on like that. Yep. There's a little square recess. Kind of at an angle, but it fits. 40k guy, hello, how are you doing? Make sure that's nice and tight down there. You know, one thing I'm noticing about this kit, I've cleaned off a lot of the sprue injection points when I'm cutting them away from the sprue, but I don't think I've done a mold line anywhere. Where are the mold? Just everything about this kit is so well thought out to have a small number of parts, but also to have them fit well on the sprue. Like even the that little machine gun part has. I mean, I've made more of a mess with the poly cement than anything to do with the mold lines. Let's see, can I make it worse? Or yeah, that helps a little. It's fine, it'll look like a weld. So the last thing for the upper hull is the fuel tanks. So we've got 3 like long thin fuel tanks, and then we've got the 2 short fat ones on the back. And they all appear to be here and here. So now comes the boring part of the stream, where I put together a whole bunch of drums. Actually, I should probably check before I pull them all off. Oh, they look like duplicates. And like one piece has the recess and the pegs so that it lines up with the top, and so that you glue it into those pegs on the hull. So yeah, I don't think they're paired up. Kind of like the tracks, there wasn't a the top of the tracks had a left and right, but the bottom track piece was duplicated. So I reckon we stick these together and then stick the other ones together, and then we can see if we can deal with any drum roll please, says Grandpa Wolf, and then we see if we get any squeeze out at the end that we can clean up. Like I said, this particular poly cement is one that I quite like for various reasons, and one of them is because it's both slightly thicker and has the aggregate. If you just put it right up to the edge and squeeze, it will seep out ever so slightly in. Let's get a close up to explain what I'm talking about. So that join, you can see it there. I've got all this just tiny bubbles of the poly cement squeezing out. That means that all along that join is completely filled. And so when that's dry, I can come along with the back of a knife and just gently scrape it away as if it were a mold line. In fact, very similar to how a mold line works, and get a perfectly smooth finish. And that's why I prefer the thicker poly cements to the thinner stuff. And yeah, we'll have to do the ends as well, because that's where the sprue points are. Focus on the table. No, I shall focus on nothing. Good job, camera. Good job. One thing I haven't decided about this before I do the priming. One thing I haven't decided is before I do the priming, I might put some texture on, like where the armor panels are welded together, because the T34 is a welded construction. But also where there would be dirt collecting and stuff like that, I'll actually glue on some physical texture so that when I then paint it, it has much more visual interest, particularly around the tracks. No, not the tracks, because I'm going to be mixing up a batch of texture paste for all of the bases for my models, and I'll do the tracks. I'll do the mud for the tracks then. Makes sense to do it all together. But certainly the welds and some rust in crevices and recesses, stuff like that. Yeah. Some good squeeze out on that one. It's really hard to hold on to these. There's no real handle. So same again, just a little too much of the polystyrene cement around the edges, give it a nice squeeze, and then when that sets, clean out the excess and make it nice and smooth. I'll do the big ones for the back as well, because that gives the first one a little extra time to dry. What I would have done, had I been sensible and thought this through, is to do this first. Glue the drums together, assemble the entire rest of the tank, and then fix the drums in last. But that would have been sensible. Who does sensible at this time of day? Right, so a piece of plastic went flinging off across to the other side of the universe. And what kind of model kit would it be if you didn't lose at least one piece, right? Where is it?
Here's what I found.
What? Go away. The amount of times that I've turned that thing off, or tried to shut it down, or tried to... Shut up! Yep, I've no idea. It's over amongst my camera and lights and boxes and stuff. I think I shall just have to go and fetch it sometime after the stream. Oh well. Speaking of stream, I've heard a lot of people talking about streaming on Twitch instead of streaming on YouTube, because Twitch is designed from the ground up to be streaming rather than videos first and then kind of streaming, which is what YouTube is. That it's easier to get things set up on Twitch. And if that is correct, would it be worth me kind of moving over? I think the one thing that the stream is missing is better focus on the camera, and that won't change that in the slightest. But things like getting the chat on screen properly, neatening things up, stuff like that might be easier to do over there than on YouTube. What does anyone else in the chat thinks? If you're kind of most of the people who are here regularly are here at the moment. YouTube is easier for subscribers to access. YouTube would be easier for my YouTube subscribers to access. But for anyone who uses Twitch, Twitch would be easier for my Twitch followers to access. Now, of course, given that have primarily been on YouTube for the last... How long have I been doing videos? 10 years? 5 years regularly, but I have made videos over 10 years ago. So yeah, my current audience is on YouTube, but then I don't have much of an audience. My stats are currently telling me I've got 3 people watching, which is cool, and welcome all of you. But would you be willing to watch on Twitch? I actually do have a Twitch follower. I've never streamed on Twitch, but I have a Twitch follower. So yes, I see the argument that my audience is on YouTube, but I don't have much of an audience. I'm certainly not one of the big famous YouTubers with millions of viewers. I'm not sure how clearly you can see this, probably not very well at all. But I do want to demonstrate my my technique for this. I'll show you on the next one. I'll bring it up to the camera to see. Jazza and Dave. Jazza as in the Australian, the kind of the artist who pretends like he's 14 years old. I mean, he seems like fun. Tabletop Time. Yeah, that's the one. Play games on Twitch. Got the app for that. Would watch you there. Okay. Right. Let's see how much of a close-up view I can get of this. So, first of all, that's the seam that I'm talking about. I'm trying to get the light to shine off it, and you can't really. So, just just through lining the poly cement all the way up to the edge and squeezing it out. That's the kind of seam you get, which is not terrible. I've seen worse in finished models, but what I can also do, I'm gonna move my microphone out of the way so I can get my hands just in the right place. There we go. I'm trying to reflect it off of the from the lights. So if I just carefully scrape this down, and there you go. That's almost not there anymore. Once a layer of paint has gone up that, I know how to use a knife. I haven't cut myself in at least 10 minutes. Usually this is how I hold the knife. So from this angle you might think that I'm cutting towards my thumb there, but I'm actually cutting beside my thumb. And it doesn't really come through in kind of the three-dimensional nature of it doesn't come through on a two-dimensional screen. But I'm not directly cutting towards myself in my usual technique. There are certain cuts, certain techniques that I will cut towards myself, but I have good control and grip on the knife at the time. Hello, Frozen Throg. Cutting towards yourself is fine. I would say, generally speaking, something that you try to avoid, because the more you cut away from yourself, the kind of the safer you are. However, so long as you have good control over the knife and understand the cut that you're making, in certain circumstances cutting towards yourself is a safer cut than cutting away. I think it was Midwinter Minis recently did a video on this kind of cut. Kind of cutting towards yourself like this is safer than trying to cut away from yourself like this and ending up cutting the end of your finger. It was usually on a, if I was cutting something like this and slipped and ended up on my finger there. So this kind of cutting away from your body isn't always the correct thing. So yes and no, and it depends, and it's an awful lot more intricate than just a single flat rule. This one hasn't come out as nice as the others, I think. And this cut here, like that there, I am directly moving towards my thumb, but I was just using the weight of the knife to cut through the poly cement. I'm not cutting through the plastic itself, I'm just taking the extra poly cement off of the surface. So even if I was to touch that knife against my skin, it's not going to cut me. Because that amount of pressure is not going to cut me. There's a lot of nuance to it. It's sort of the thing that I kind of want to do a video on, but I also don't want people to misunderstand and then cut themselves and blame me. It's one of those things where you need some very passionate Midwinter Minis video indeed. Guy had obviously run out of patience for people telling him what to do. Yes, there is that. There's also a lot of the time when I'm cutting like this. I remember someone had a go at me for cutting like this when I was actually pressing it against my thumb. But which side of the blade is the sharp side? Not the side I'm pressing into my thumb. That's the sharp side. This side is blunt. I mean, the edges of particularly the stamped sheet metal ones can have a fairly rough edge, and you can cut yourself on that. Which is why I use the back end of a knife, kind of that edge there. That's way out of focus. Be in focus. There we go. The back edge of a knife here, because that's machine cut, like stamped metal. That's a fairly harsh edge. It's not sharp so much, but I have cut myself on those. Imagine it's annoying being told what to do, but then in the same breath, I do care about its hands. I make things with my hands. I use them quite a lot, which is why I take care of them. But I take care of them in a way of me understanding what I'm doing, how I'm using them, how I'm using the tools in particular. And not just going with, oh, don't cut towards yourself, as a generally, yes, I agree. But in a lot of cases, I'm going to cut towards myself because I actually have better control over the knife. And as long as I have better control over the knife, I am safer. If I was cutting a metal, if I was cutting a metal model, I would be using very different technique because you need a lot more force. Thank you, Foxy Mitts. A lot more force to hold on to the part and press the knife through the metal. And so I would not be using this kind of technique for a metal model. But also, I sharpen these. These are disposable snap blades. I sharpen them. I keep these sharp. So keeping a sharp knife is as important as, or I think more important than cutting away from yourself. Right, now we've got these done. Which way around do they go? That way looks nice because it's got the little filler at the top, which kind of makes sense to me. According to this instruction, the filler piece goes on the outside. And on the picture on the box, it has it on the top. Amazing. Right, let's go back to my Google search. T34 fuel tanks. So I'm seeing some with nothing at the top or the side, and I'm seeing some with the filler at the top. That's great. Injured me more opening this terrible bottle of primer, says Frozen Throg. That can happen. A lot of spray cans are made from, like the actual can itself is made by rolling sheet metal. And so you can end up with some very what's it called? Burrs. You end up very sharp burrs around the edges of that metal. And yeah, I've cut myself on metal burrs on various things. Like I said, I've cut myself on the blunt side of a knife. Alright, just because I think it looks cooler, I'm going to put the little kind of doohickey there. I'm going to call it a filling hole, and I'm going to put that towards the top. It is Russian armor. Don't think it matters in the end. But you see, the Russians stuff, the Russian equipment, is put together with a lot more thought and care than the propaganda will have you believe. Russian engineers, both during the Second World War and more recently, are world-leading engineers. But there are different emphasis. There's a different emphasis in certain times. And so something like the, particularly during wartime World War II, the Russians were very good at emphasizing expediency. Just get something that works, make it as simple as possible so that we can make more of them. And so while the British were lathe machining submachine guns, the Russians were using stamp sheet metal and making them by the million. And that would be Lancaster and like the PPD. Of course, both of those got simplified versions. The British went to a simplified version of the Lancaster in the Sten. And the PPD, sort of the PPD became the PPSH-41, but because there's a lot of differences in those designs. But from the PPSH-41 you go on to PPS-43. Anyway, I'm just using the submachine guns as an example. But you see it all over. While the certain countries are making the most complicated, convoluted things and saying, hey, look at how cool we can make stuff. Well, yeah, that's great. But can you make 1 million of them? And the Russians were, okay, that's a nice design. Make it simpler so that we can make 1 million of them. And they did. Actually, one great example that I might have a model of nearby. Hey look, some Soviet infantry. The right. This rifle is an anti-tank rifle in 14.7mm, which is absolutely huge. It's such a large caliber that you can't really shoot it in a fixed weapon without breaking your shoulder. And so this was designed with a recoil management system. There's a big spring in there and the whole barrel recoils down on the spring so that you can shoot it from the shoulder. The cartridge and the gun for this were designed in less than a month. From the time when this weapon was ordered by, I think it was by Stalin himself, to the time when it was in soldiers' hands in combat was less than a month. That time of getting a mechanical system designed and built is almost unheard of. That would be a PTR-D specifically. So PTR is sort of translates into anti-tank rifle. The D is Degtyarev, which was the designer, and it would be 1941. So it would be a PTR-D 41. There's also another version. Uses the same cartridge, but is actually a completely different gun. It's a semi-auto with a 5-round magazine. And that is the PTR-S42, and that was designed by another Russian weapons designer, Semenov, who has made a lot of very good firearms designs. So I've only got one of these two drums for the back because I lost one of them across the other side of the room. I mean, it's probably still on my desk. I didn't hear it fall. I just can't see it. And I've got so much stuff and wires at the moment for streaming, so let's get that in place. And I shall put this somewhere safe. Let's put it in the bag so that I don't lose it, because otherwise I would lose it. Arguably, the T34 won World War II. That's a bold claim. I don't think any one factor won World War II. However, the T34 was pivotal, certainly, as an important design. Plastic bottle for an airbrush. Ammo by MiG. Oh, is that the one that cut you? Yeah. Plastic bottle. Was it on a sprue injection point on the plastic bottle? Because I have cut myself on a bottle of cola from Tesco's, because there's a sprue injection point right on the rim where you unscrew it, and I've cut my thumb on that once. So this is as far as we've got. Just over an hour in, we've got kind of the lower hull with all of the track sections, and we've got the upper hull with all the bits except for the drum that I lost. And that for the T34 ZP is essentially the build complete, but because you just throw the resin turret on top. There you go. However, because the kit comes with the full plastic T34 85, I have another turret. And given that I play bolt action as well, I may as well build both and have one tank with the two different turrets, because then I can switch between them depending on what game I'm playing. So let's get... Just terrible, it jams itself shut. Yeah, okay. That sounds awful. Just a poor design. Shampoo... Oh. Shampoo cap on a bottle of... Ew. That sounds awful. Didn't get that one cut. Now, one thing I've noticed about this, because I have looked at the sprue before I built it today. Usually, in model kits with turrets and kind of cannons sticking out in this kind of way, you would have a round or cylindrical recess here, and then a cylindrical piece that would glue in place so that you can elevate the gun. Kind of, you rotate it up and down around that axis. But this doesn't have that. This has just this tab that glues in. So I don't think that this gun is intended to be elevated. Obviously we can turn the turret to point it in a different direction, but we can't actually kind of raise it up or down. And I think if that just goes in there, yeah, it all just glues in and it's fairly solid. There's no... Yeah, there's no up or down. 40k guy, you can't just say that type of thing without then telling us what the model company is. Am I still in frame? I'm just about in frame. Just cleaning off the sprue injection points. I will be doing the same thing that I did with the drums on the turret here. Master Box Limited. Okay, I have not heard of Master Box Limited. Miniatures for dioramas. Interesting models. What type of scale models are they? Hello, Paul. How you doing? Oh, yeah, larger scales, 1 to 35. 1 to 35 is 54 mil, right? Or close. It's kind of close. Obviously, we've discussed scale, kind of hero scale versus true scale on Back to the Brush podcast, which I co-host with Paul Allen, who is currently in chat. I'm just in the middle of gluing this turret together, so I'll read some comments in a second. But yeah, just like bolt action is, the vehicles are 1 to 56 scale, and the people are 28mm hero scale. Now, if you do the maths on the heights, you find that the height of a person in 1 to 56 is very similar to 32mm, and 32mm is the height of a person in 28mm hero scale, because the 28mm refers to the height of the eyes, not the height of the top of the head. Because why would it be simple? Let's just make everything far more confusing, just for fun. In the same way, I think that 54mm hero scale, where a person would be 58mm tall, and 1 to 35 would also be 58mm or close to. My moderation staff are too busy looking at cats. That's fine. One thing I'm noticing about this turret, which I will say is a negative point against this model kit. The drums and the top of the tracks and other bits have little tabs that line up, so that when you put the polystyrene cement and you hold the pieces together, they sit where they should be and they glue together nice and strong. The top and bottom of the turret, however, unfortunately, do not. They have there's no kind of locating pins or tabs or anything like that, and so it's slightly squirming around. I kind of want to leave it alone for a little bit to let that set. My moderation staff are having an argument with each other in the chat, which is, I find, is quite amusing. Given that I am a highly professional YouTuber with millions and millions of views every day, obviously I need the most professional of moderation staff. It's just like, you're the people I trust, kind of. When I was setting it up and I set you as moderators, that's all it is. You were just unlucky. So I'm noticing that this piece is asymmetric. Sure if you can really tell on camera, but this side is slightly thinner than this side. I'm just looking up some information, going back to my Google search. It seems like it should be on the right hand side, and so it should be that way around. That looks correct from these pictures. 40k guy asks, what is my favourite cat breed? My favourite cat breed is a cat that doesn't stand on me and dig its claws. and doesn't knock things off of shelves and other things that cats do. I like animals, I just find them very disruptive. That's interesting. So it doesn't actually fit together. Can you see that little bit of wobble there? It's possible that there's something inside the slot that I didn't cut out. I don't see any sprue or anything else that would be in the way. I also noticed that there's some clearance this way, which is probably intended because on the real one this would rotate up and down. I think what I'm going to do, drastic measures, is just shorten that ever so slightly. Because if it's going to be fixed, I may as well have it securely mounted. There we go. That's nice and secure. Right. Another thing about having a pet is I can barely look after myself, so expecting me to look after an animal as well is a recipe for disaster, and I don't want to hurt an animal, any kind of animal. Therefore, the best option is for me to not have a pet. I think what I should probably do is leave that aside for the moment and move on to some other things. What are these things? So we've got an aerial, turret hatch, and the gun. We also have the crew, or a crew member, and even though in combat you would never have a member of crew sticking his head out the top, because I am making a model and I want the model to look cool, I am of course going to have a member of the crew sticking his head up at the top, because it just looks good. And to that end, not only do I have this crew member that I'm going to have sticking up out of the top, I have bits that I might be able to make crew for the other turret as well. Hello Nick, how are you doing? I'm building a tank. How well does that fit? That fits in perfectly, so I'll just throw that in. The turret halves have gone together fairly well, actually. It's starting to feel pretty secure at this point. Was that any actual polycement, or was that just a bubble? There we go. That's some. Okay, I'm having an interesting issue here in that polycement is forming a seal around the opening of the cannon and is creating an air bubble that is then acting as a spring. There we go. That's in now. Do you remember what I was saying about mold lines? I didn't even think to look at the mold lines on this gun. Let's have a nice close look. So this, where's my focal range? Where is my focal range? There, right, there's my focal range. So I didn't clean any mold lines off of the side of this gun. I cleaned the end, I cleaned the front and the back end, and that was it. Where's the mold line? It's nowhere. Oh, you can just see it there. Can just see it. Can almost feel it. I wonder. Let's see if we can run. Almost did nothing. So that was just using the weight of the knife. So I'm holding the knife like this, so I'm not actually pressing down on the knife. I'm just running the blade down that mold line, and it's almost not there. It is almost not there. Releasing some more Elysians. Ooh. Anyone in chat has been thinking about the Elysian Drop Troops and the Drop Troops fan codex, which I did some work on a little while ago. Devic Designs will apparently be releasing a new set. Near invisible until primed. That is true. That is true. Paint has the habit of bringing these things out. Right, how's my focus? Yeah, it's still okay. So it seems I did manage to leave a little gap when I was gluing the turret halves together, kind of just here. Not sure if you see the kind of dark line there, so that's just a little bit of a gap where I didn't have enough poly cement. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you mean crouched? You did a crouched one in the first set. The medic was kneeling. I remember the medic because I painted the medic. That squad, kind of my Elysian squad, or, well, my Rusty Razors custom regiment, as it were, ended up being more Devic Designs than anything else. Even though Paul bought a box of Cadians specifically. Oh, crochet. Right, not crouched. This in the background here, this here, is Stitch. And Stitch is a knitted Escher doll. If you search through my channel for Escher, you'll find that's probably the first one on the list. Might be the second. But yeah. A fully... what was she? She's 30 centimetres, right? So... 1/12? 1/6. 1/6 scale. Ish. Not that a knitted... I'm not going to hold a knitted model to being perfectly in any kind of scale. Yeah, this turret join is going to be visible at the end of all of this, which is a little disappointing. Ah, yes. Did I not say Fox Emits? I apologise if I did not. Yeah, Fox Emits, who is chief researcher for the audio redactors and moderator on the channel, in chat at the moment. Made that up, which is kind of fun. I think I may need to switch tools at some point, because while I can generally get a nice rounded surface out of a knife, the back of a knife like this, yeah, I may have to take some sandpaper to this at some point later on, just to get the smoothness out of it. It's like I'm getting it fairly round, I'm just not getting it as kind of smooth. Maybe I just haven't waited long enough. That's more likely to be the problem, is that the poly cement is still evaporating. Fox Emits, given that you're moderator, you have the ability to post links in the chat. So would you like to post a link to your commission's website page, wherever that is? That bit's come out fairly smooth. I think I'm just kind of being a bit too picky about this. It's going to be fine. But yeah, I'm just going to... I'll leave it for now, and then once I finish the stream and it's had a few hours to dry, I'll take some sandpaper and smooth that out. What is next? Dropping things on the floor is next. The antenna is next. Oh, you have your own website, I forgot. Fancy. I think this is the biggest the mold line is on any of this model, on this aerial piece, and it's still so small that it's difficult to to cut away, and because if I cut even as deep as the mold line, it's just going to make it look worse than leaving the mold line there. Right. So that's us with an aerial on our turrets. And I think then it's just the crew. So yeah, we've got the tracks, lost one of the drums, got the exhaust, drums. There was this. This is the kind of spare tracks, which none of the pictures have. I might scroll through my my Google image search to see if I can see if there's any similar to that. Did that? Yeah, and it's just the turret hatch. So, let's have a look at what we've got in the way of crew. What's that? That looks like an important piece. Is that part of the gun? No. What is it? Oh, okay. I won't be needing that. So that piece is so that you, I guess you glue it onto the bottom of this. You glue it through the hole in the turret and it holds the turret on. But as I explained at the beginning of the stream, I have two turrets for this tank. I have the T34-85 and the T34-ZP, the science fictiony one, with the sonic cannon. I need to look up the lore of what this actually is, but it does look pretty cool. Spare tracks are optional, but look cool. Yeah, it's kind of what I was getting at. So even though the spare track sections is something that tank crews would carry around on their tank because it's one of the most fragile parts, but also one of the easiest parts to replace. So having a few extra links is a sensible thing to have. It says here in the instructions to glue it onto the front, but in the pictures on the model of the model on the box, they're not fitted. There's none there, and it was just interesting. But yeah, it's absolutely an optional thing. As long as there's... Is there any other place on the tank where it would fit? There's so much stuff everywhere. This is going to be fun to paint. Particularly as I'm blue tack installation. Yeah, so... what was I saying? Greebles, yes. So one of the things I'm doing for my Soviet army is I'm painting the entire thing with non-metallic metals. For my infantry, that's actually surprisingly easy because if you have a look at this dude, well, there's the gun barrel and the magazine is just about the only thing that's metal. Everything else is fabric and canvas. But the my camera just disconnected. Seems to be looking okay, so let's continue. That was a very easy way to distract me. Non-metallic metal, yes. On the infantry it's kind of easy because there's so little metal, but on this there's most of it's going to have kind of the tan paint. I'm going with a tan and brown scheme, but there's going to be just a lot of little opportunities to put in, like maybe these ridges, the vents at the back, the tracks certainly, maybe the gun, just to paint in some interesting non-metallic metal. And yes, so Frozen Throg says that they got did you get the exact same kit, the ZP turret? This I actually have to say this is probably one of the best resin cast pieces I've ever had, and Frozen Throg is saying that they had the same part that's kind of a bit rough. And that is somewhat of a problem with resin casting, is that it is so inconsistent. This particular one is so smooth and nice that you can actually see the layer lines where the original was 3D printed. And I'll see if I can get some reflections on. So I'm looking at this panel here, trying to get the reflections to show up the layer lines. I can see it with the naked eye. You can't really see it on camera there. There was a little bit of flashing in the middle, but that's not really a problem. It's hard to get to and it's hard to see, so it doesn't really matter. I would say that the only damage is right here on the turret, on the cupola ring. There's a little chunk that's taken away, and that's kind of such a minor thing. I have had some other Warlord Games resin pieces. The Kings of War Armada, the ships. They were okay. They had some imperfections. They're not the best I've ever had. Probably the worst resin piece I've ever had was from Games Workshop. There's some Citadel Finecast. They're so bad. And actually looking at the sprues, they're not designed in the way that you build resin cast sprues. They're built in the way that you cast, that you design like plastic sprues like this. Soviet starter kit. Oh, the what is it? The Kings of War Soviet starter kit. I'm not convinced that I would have gone with that. I kind of like it just because of what's in it. But I think I would still go the way I went, which is to buy just some infantry secondhand, and then everything else, like a lot of it's 3D printed. So something that I'm working on at the moment. Here's a... Where am I focused? Where am I focused? I have no idea. There we go. ED-SKaR, DSHK-37 heavy machine gun. I painted up some crew to go with it. Because these are historical things, you can't really copyright it, and so I'm quite happy to print off a ZIS-3 T20 Comosolet. I've got a BA-64 that I've named Stalker, which is absolutely wrecked in its first game, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to non-historical stuff like this, because this is not a real historical thing, this is a fictional thing from Warlord Games, I'm gonna buy their one. Right, you're distracting me again because I was working on the crew. So that piece I'm ignoring because that's the kind of turret retention piece that I don't want. And then I've got head, body, and 3 arms, interestingly. They're so small. So this is the... this is also from Warlord Games. This is the bolt action Soviet infantry. Just to compare some of the arms. Wait, there we go. Perfect one. Pointing arm and pointing arm right here. Essentially the same piece, but this one's in 1:56 scale, and this one is in, this one underneath is in 32 hero scale. It's so much different in size. All right. Get sidetracked. I'm going to clip these out, otherwise I never will. Do I want to... There's a reason why Games Workshop Finecast has a nickname of Failcast. Gargunkel, if I can pronounce your name correctly, Gargunkel Nerf, hello, and other assorted viewers, welcome. I am making good headway in this tank. I almost thought, like when I was thinking about doing a like building this model for the live stream, I almost thought that it wouldn't take long enough. Like, I can build a tank in half an hour. It's a nice simple one as well. So it'll be a nice 30 minutes. What do I do for the other? Because I usually stream for an hour and for 2 hours. What do I do for the other hour and a half? Well, it's now hour and 47 and I haven't finished yet. Well, I've kind of finished the tank, but I haven't finished the crew. So I think the crew, like the tank commander, is kind of holding on to the hatch. So I might have to. Oh, all right. Well, it works as a hinge. It works as a real hinge. Look at that! It closes and it opens. It's literally grabbing on by the. Yeah, it's popped off. All right. I think I need to build the crew first. Ed, complete something in half an hour on stream. Ha! Not with us distracting you. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, it's fine. Talking of other things that I haven't finished on stream. I've nearly finished the Cowboys. I've got 6 of the 7 completed, and it's just this one that needs a little more work. Done the shirt, and I need to do the rest. Originally this was 5, and then I had used the Frostgrave model to make 6, and then I've 3D printed this body to make 7. I've got enough heads and arms, considering printing up a whole bunch more bodies. So Gargunkel Nerf asks, was wondering what actual miniatures games do you play with all the models in your videos? The most recent stuff that I've done videos on is the Tanith First and Only, which is for Warhammer 40k. Now, I don't really play 40k very much, but 40k is probably one of the most popular tabletop war games around at the moment. Then my Soviet Army is for Bolt Action, which I think is a really cool, really fun game. Bolt Action being a historical World War II game. And this particular tank that I'm working on at the moment is for both Bolt Action and Conflict 47. So with this turret, it is a historically accurate, well, roughly historically accurate T34 85. Switch the turret and you get the science fiction T34 ZP, the fictional alternate reality Soviets built in 1947, because World War II didn't end in 1945 like it did in Iraq. There is also, I can't remember the name of it, but there's another game system that I'm looking at starting at the moment that is a high fantasy style game. It's also made by Warlord Games, and it's a very similar rule system, what I'm told. But it's really forgiving about what models you use. So I've got some Warhammer Fantasy models and some other things, so I'm playing that. Someone I know at the local gaming shops bought the rulebook. Guess I was largely wondering about the Cowboys. Well, I haven't actually played any games with the Cowboys, which is a shame because I do want to. They are from Dead Man's Hand is the game that those models are intended to be used with. There's another. So Dead Man's Hand is actually seems a very interesting way that Dead Man's Hand works. You have a pack of cards, like a normal everyday pack of cards, and you, like at the beginning of the turn, you draw a certain number of cards based on how big the game is. So you could be playing a duel with one character each, or you could be playing an outlaw gang versus a lawman posse. So you might have 4 or 5 or 6 on each side. Erewhon, Legend of Erewhon. That's the game I was talking of. His Legend of Erewhon? Yeah, that sounds right. Dead Man's Hat. So you draw a number of playing cards, and each one has a special rule associated with it. So, for example, if you drew the 8 of diamonds, that would give one of your characters the ability to move and shoot as if they were standing still, or something like that. I don't remember the exact rules because I haven't read the rules. But just that system of drawing playing cards rather than a strict turn order is kind of an interesting one. I'm trying to work out how these arms go together. I kind of like the pointing arm. I'm going to go with the pointing arm. Another game that I've been playing recently is Kings of War Armada, which is a ship game. And that's romantic games. Yep, see you in a bit, Paul. So those mold lines again, they're so small I can barely see them. Mutants and Masterminds. That sounds fun. Ed, want to battle in Dawn of War on livestream? I think I have Dawn of War. Yeah, if you want to eat me a message and we'll consider something. See what games we both got that we can do something with. So I think I will say I'm slightly less forgiving about how the tank commander goes together. That point is a little awkward, and it doesn't really join up at the shoulder that well. I'm being so nitpicky because the rest of the tank has been such a good model kit to build. So that kind of just goes to show how much I'm enjoying this this kit. So that's another left arm. That's the right arm. So I think this one has to line up with the hatch. So what I'm going to do here is be very quick and very messy, and it's going to go horribly wrong. So it's good that I'm not broadcasting this to the entire internet, where it could come back to embarrass me. Is I'm not going to glue the tank commander in because I want to paint them separately. I'm going to glue this hand on, kind of the left hand. And then I'm going to glue the turret hatch on, and because I've got a few seconds with poly cement, I'm going to try to make it line up because I think this hand is supposed to be holding on to the hatch, I think. And I'm going to have a go, and we're going to see if that can go horribly wrong. Yeah. Right. Going to go for a nice generous dollop of poly cement there. Another thing I like about this particular poly cement is that because it's kind of thicker, the viscosity holds stuff together, and so you can just kind of dump stuff and flick it across the room. Right, hatch in place. Fold the hatch up. all going well so far. Tank commander in. Ah. Line up the hand with the hatch. So I'll tell you one thing for free. It does not line up very well. Nope. Nope, that's... Yep, that's a disaster. That has not gone well at all. Ah! And I'm dropping it again. Yep, well, I'm just going to have to leave it like that. That'll be close enough. It's not holding on to the hatch like I wanted it to. Kind of, yeah, if you see that hand is way far forwards. I could probably push the hatch forward a little bit more and have that like that. Kinda gets close. Right, let's glue his head on because I don't want to I don't want to lose his head. Oh, oh. Disaster. Disaster. Well, that, other than that lost piece, I've lost track of where I was in the chat. Hopefully there was nothing important. Nick will show no mercy in Dawn of War, given that I've probably played it twice. You'll win anyway. No one would show Ed mercy. Ain't that the truth? Ed, could you tell me about the rotating base thing you use when printing minis? When painting minis looks 3D printed. In fact, if this is what you mean, this is my second version in black. I have another one in orange. This is my overly complicated painting handle. And it's essentially for ergonomics, and everything I do eventually revolves around ergonomics. So whenever I'm holding a paintbrush, I've got paintbrush around here somewhere probably. So whenever I'm kind of painting a model and holding a paintbrush to it, I find it far easier to be holding it at this angle. So if I'm holding a model like this, I kind of end up resting it against my hands. To hold my hand in this position, I am straining my thumb. Like, I can feel this muscle here being very tense. But also, can you see my ring finger and my middle finger here are touching my thumb? I'm straining the tendons along the back of my hand as well to hold that in place and to hold it steady. And so for a long period of time, if I'm painting a model for 3 or 4 hours, I might not paint it in one go in 3 hours, but I might paint over the course of a couple of days for several hours. That gets very uncomfortable. And so, if I can hold on to something that's this size, well, I can grab hold of this as tight or as loose as I want, and it's so much more comfortable. However, if you see all of these contraptions here, this is so that I can move the model around and paint any angle. Like, I can paint under the armpit here, or I can paint under the hat. I can paint kind of, the boots are easier to get to from this direction than they are kind of like this. You end up kind of striping across it. And so, but also the axis of rotation is the same. The axis of rotation is through the model. So I can hold like this and paint the model, and if I rotate it around, my grip is basically the same to paint the model. And that is my design, and it will be for sale eventually. Unfortunately, at the moment, my 3D printer, where did I put my water? There it is. My FDM machine is currently broken. I sent the parts to Paul so that he could test print them, and his FDM machine is also broken. So at the moment, I'm not really in a position to be finishing the design. I need to make a few differences to some of these parts before I sell it, because I want it to be the best it can be before I sell it. But it will be for sale eventually. But yeah, that's that. The overcomplicated, way too complicated mini painting handle. So one other thing that I wanted to do, and you'll hear I'm rooting through a box of plastic to do this. I have some other bits on sprues, and I want to make a tank commander for the ZP as well. So the plastic kit only comes with one tank commander, which is fine. One is fine if you're only building one turret. But because I'm building both turrets, I want to see if I can have a go at building a tank commander for the ZP as well. Now I do have in here some 1:48 scale models that I might be able to put in. Going to have to do something about that head. And the metal hatch was there somewhere. I don't want to deal with the hatch yet because I'll want to paint the tank commander separately. Currently surrounded by sprues and I've got no place to put my arms. Kind of that works in there, so I just need to sort out some arms. Given that I've got this arm, yeah, it works. But let's deal with the head first, because this kind of leaning forwards, kind of, I think he's supposed to be sitting down. This is from a motorcycle and sidecar kit, so he's sitting down at this kind of angle, and that's why his head's leaning forward so much. I do have, because I knew this was coming, I do have a head in the form of this. So this is a Frostgrave head, and this is from a female Mountain Warriors set that I've used in so many kit bashes, but she's wearing a kind of a woolly hat that it's not quite a Ushanka, but it's somewhat similar. So if I can just get this head onto this torso, so just cutting out the collar first. This other kit is it's a much harder plastic. Definitely glues with poly cement because that's how I built it. I'm going to have to cut out some of this neck. Usually use a 1-inch dowel cut to 2 inches long. Fix the mini to the rod using either a stick. So what's that? 25 by about 50 mil. That's really small. I guess you're holding it like this, kind of across your hand, and you're kind of holding it in between these fingers here. And even at 25 mil, it's meaning that instead of squeezing your hands together like this, your hands are further apart, which is much more comfortable. So that is absolutely a valid solution. I'm going to cut a little shaving off of the back of the neck just to try and get that to fit a little better. Yeah, there's a lot of solutions to a painting handle, just to hold on to small things. I mean, look at jewelry makers and other crafting based things where people have to hold on to small things for long periods of time. The human hand is not particularly effective at holding on to very small things for long periods of time. I think that's good enough. For the most part, just making a nice big block that you can comfortably hold in your hand, and then attaching the small thing that you're working on to the end of it is usually enough. And so having a block of wood, like you say, or when I first got back, well, when I got back into painting, when I got back to the brush, which conveniently is the name of my podcast, I used a 25mm PVC pipe. I used the full length of it because I wanted to have it running all the way through my hand and having it touch the heel of my hand here, because that's just how I prefer things. But I realized that for me that was too small, too thin, and so when I designed my overly complicated version, making it thicker was one of the requirements. Now, I made it too thick, way too thick. My first version is well, you're a nerfer. Imagine putting two Talon mags, imagine two Talon mags and holding onto them. That's how big it was. Way too big. So I just want to see how this is going to sit. I actually kind of want to have it at that kind of angle. All right, cutting is happening. I'm cutting the shoulder of this arm so that it's way out to the side, because then it looks like she's resting her hand. Yeah, that's better. There we go. Hand on the tight ring. So let's go through this other kit and see what left arms we have. So we don't need the bodies, don't need the headlight for the motorcycle, don't need the rifle, or the other rifle, or the submachine gun, or the other submachine gun, or the machine gun. Yeah, okay, I'll stop this joke now. I've got everything left over from the two motorcycle kits because I didn't. It's a World War II motorcycle and sidecar, but I didn't use them as a World War II motorcycle and sidecar. I used them as empty motorcycles for just to throw in as for roleplay games, so that I could say, oh yeah, you come across a motorcycle, And here it is, and you can put your character next to it to say that you're in the motorcycle. So I think I have 2 arms. Two left arms. Because those look like they're exactly the same. So one of these arms is very much a kind of arm out front holding onto a motorcycle grip. Oh no. Oh no. Alright. That's a bit of a problem. The arms are very different sizes. So this motorcycle kit is a 1:48 kit, and the tank is a 1:56. So that arm is tiny, and given that I don't have another left arm for in that scale, I'm probably just going to go with 2 of the slightly bigger arms. Okay. In which case, let's grab out all of the arms and decide which ones we want to use. That was the duplicate. That's the same as that one, right. The long arm of the Soviet tank commander, yes. Now, maybe if I use this arm, because it's kind of held in, I might be able to have that arm inside the turret, because this is a pretty big, like if you compare the size of the cupolas of these 2 tanks, this one's very big. So if I just glue this arm on, I might be able to just have it like rested down at her, kind of maybe on some control or something like that, that's kind of out of sight. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's okay. Might need some shaving to get the other arm on, but we'll work something out. And then I can put that arm off like that, as if she's resting it on the hatch, or kind of the cupola ring. Yeah, this is going to be way fiddly. I'll sort this out at some point. But there we go. Tank commander for the ZP. And weirdly, the hatch for the ZP is metal. So this will get glued on probably at the back, something like that. Yeah. And Paul is back. Hello. I think I'm just about done. I'm probably going to end the stream at this point because I'm not going to glue anything to the turret because it's resin cast. I need to wash it before I prime it, or before I also. For resin parts that you wash before you prime, wash it before you glue anything to it. My focus keeps changing. But there's my tank commander for the ZP. Kit bashed up. I'm gonna, like I say, I'm gonna shave that a little bit to get her in there because it's a little too big, but that's kind of fiddly, and we're running over time, so I'm happy to do that later. But we've also got the T34 85 with Tank Commander as well. And that's what I wanted to achieve today, and so we can call that a success. And I shall put all these bits and parts and sprues and everything. Actually, that's the point. I'm going to check the sprue and see what parts we have left over, because that's always fun. I know we've got that turret retention piece left over. That. Which is not so much a visual part as like just a lump. That's the alternate machine gun for the hull. That'll go in the Greebles box. We've got the spare tracks, which I'm probably going to glue onto the front of the hull. And we've got that other box, which is kind of just a bit uninteresting and flat. So, not a lot, but cool stuff. Anyway, I will probably end the stream now then. So, if anyone has any questions, I'll give you... what are we at? We're at 17 minutes past. I'll give you 3 minutes. I'll be generous. I'll give you 3 minutes to ask any questions you want about this project, about other projects, or anything else that I'm getting up to. And then I will end the stream. So I'm pretty sure I missed some stuff on the chat, but I'm not going to run back and find them. Anyway. So how many sub-assemblies did this end up being? The tracks are one sub-assembly. Tracks in the lower hull. The upper hull is another piece. Each of the turrets, and then each of the commanders. I'll probably glue the hatch onto this turret before I prime it. So that's what, 2, 4, 6. 6 sub-assemblies for this one for this one vehicle. Nice. And I still need to find that barrel that I pinged across the table, which I have no idea where it ended up. Oh, I found it. Yay. We can complete everything. Ha ha ha. Just get the whole front lines. There's one hatch each. So the plastic turret has a plastic hatch that's glued in place, and I've tried to position the commander's hand as if he's holding onto it, but it doesn't quite line up properly. But that hatch is part of that piece now that's glued in place. And then for the resin turret, strangely, it has a metal hatch. So that's a piece that I'll glue onto that later. It's kind of odd that you've got like the main plastic kit. I understand why they made a resin turret for the science fiction version, because this probably isn't going to sell as well as just the historical version. There's going to be less people interested. It makes sense to make that as a resin piece, because resin casting in small numbers is cheaper than plastic, and plastic in larger numbers is cheaper than resin. But I don't understand why they went with a resin turret and a metal hatch. Unless this hatch is something that they already make. If there's other kits that use this exact piece, which it still seems strange, because I would have thought that this would have been easier to cast them both in resin at the same time. But apparently not. Right, let's shave down the ends of this. Glue this in place. might be the shape of it. Resin is not the most durable. That is true. Saying that, metal is not also metal is not that much stronger than like the kind of pewter that metal models are made out of is not that much stronger than resin. It's possible that is a thing that might make sense. That might be a good reason. One thing that's kind of slightly annoying is that the hatch, like the turret, doesn't have any way to actually glue the hatch open, so I'm going to have to carve out some of the cupola ring. I'm going to have to carve some of it out to make a place to glue that in. But that's just a fiddly thing that I'll do some other time. For now, you've had the allotted 3 minutes and several more. So I shall call the stream over. Thank you very much to everyone who took part. Let's see if I can open up the... I don't know why, but the participants section of the chat never works for me. It's showing just me by myself. Anyway, thank you very much to everyone who took part. I remember seeing Frozen Throg and Gargunkel Nerf, Foxy Mitts and Paul Allen. There was also Nicholas in here at some point. Grandpa Werewolf was here, and some others as well. So thank you everyone thank you everyone for popping past. I have built the tank that I wanted to build, both versions of it, and I shall see you again next week. Next week we're going to do some painting, kind of back to painting, given that that's usually what I do. I'll consider Twitch, because the tools over at Twitch are a little more advanced and easier to use, but depends on how things go. I'll either make the announcement that I'm on Twitch or I'll just stream on YouTube again. Either way, for now, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you for coming along. And end stream. Bye bye.